Okay, everybody. So in this video, I'm going to review the different study options you have available to you. I'm going to do so briefly. Under week one, you should see a link that says research study options. Now, it might look a little different by the time you get to it, but you should see a research study option link on here. Okay, now click on that, and you'll have the different study options here. You have actually 6 options to choose from, and each study option has 2 IVs and 1 DV. Right, so for example, here you have 1 IV, the second IV, and the DV for study option 1, right? And study option 1 focuses on, well, how is reading a mindset statement, growth or fixed, related to math performance? Now, just really briefly, fixed mindset is when you see learning as something that, well, more not so much learning skill, as something that's fixed. I'm just not good at math. Or you can see it as I'm just good at math. That's also fixed. Growth would be, well, I might be okay at math now, but if I keep practicing, I could do higher level math. Or I'm not good at math now, but the more I practice, the better I can get at it. Right? You know you can get better if you practiced. That would be growth. Whereas fixed would be, I'm at the level I'm at, and that's not going to change. So for this study, we're presenting the participants with a growth or a fixed mindset statement, right? We're not measuring their actual, whether they carry or have a fixed or growth mindset statement about math. We're introducing a statement and seeing, well, how does that impact their performance on a math task? And how does participant sex relate to that, right? Whether they're male or female. Now, I do want to point out that anytime you see participant sex in the study options, you can change that to gender identity, right? If that's one of your interests. And also, not in this study, because we don't have ethnicity, but in any study where you have ethnicity as an IV, I'm fine with you, well, I'm not only fine, I'm asking you to pick 2 different ethnicity groups you want to focus on for that study. So keep that in mind. For those two, you have those 2 options. For ethnicity, I do want you to pick. Let's go on to option 2. So now I'm going to give you more of an overview. But you know what? Actually, I didn't go over this part. So every IV, you can see here, has 2 levels. One way to think about levels are 2 different groups that fit in within that label for that IV. So mindset statement is the IV. Well, you have a growth mindset statement or a fixed mindset statement. Within participant sex, 2 groups under that, male, female. If you're doing gender identity, it would be something like LGBTQIA or cis, right? Or it could be heterosexual and queer, right? You choose the options, right? But they do have to be 2 options. So keep that in mind. For the dependent variable, that one I ask that you don't change. So keep that in mind. Every study has 2 IVs. Every IV has 2 levels or 2 groups within it or underneath it. Now for this study, we're looking at gaming ability. That's a DV. You can see it here as well. And we're looking at how does stress impact gaming ability? A low or high stress situation. And does this impact female and male participants differently? So you might be asking, well, why am I expecting that? Well, I'm thinking about this study, well, how should I say this? I designed the study to see, does it impact female and male participants differently? Because I think there is still an existing idea of who plays video games. And because of that, when you place female participants in a stressful situation, I'm wondering, does that impact their play? And the important part is choosing a gender-neutral game, a sex-neutral game that male or female participants shouldn't have more exposure to, and seeing how this plays out, seeing how stress impacts their ability, right? In the third option, I'm interested in seeing studying harassment and social media in online settings, obviously, because that's social media, and seeing does that differ based on ethnicity and participant sex. Again, for ethnicity, you can change this. Right now I have Black and Middle Eastern. You can use Latinx and Asian. Think about, what you find the most interesting and choose groups where you would expect to find a difference. And then we have the fourth option, mindset, participant sex, and digital literacy. This is exactly like the math one, except instead of focusing on math ability, we're focusing on digital literacy. So digital literacy has to do with your ability to use technology in everyday settings, right? So for example, creating a video, uploading a video, just using a computer, troubleshooting an issue on your computer. That would be digital literacy. And how does that relate to these different statements, growth or fixed, and participant sex? And for those of you interested in culture, I think number 5 would be an interesting option for you. So in this study, we're looking at, well, how does a participant ethnicity and participant sex relate to how much they do at home or whether they expect to help family in the future, right? So I said or because you have an option regarding the DVs you're going to focus on. There's actually 3 options. You can choose how much that person is doing at home, and keep in mind this is focusing on students, right? So in this study, you should primarily, and actually in all studies, but in this study especially, you should primarily be focusing on students. And the first option is how much do you do at home? How much responsibility do you have at home? The third option for the DV is, do you value being able to help your family in the future, right? In the actual paper, what they called it, so I got this DV from a paper, it's called Value of Supporting Family in the Future. But it's like, do you expect to help your family financially when you're older? Is that something you value, that's important to you? Not just something that's forced on you, right? But is it something that you think is important? Whereas respect for family focuses more on the cultural value of how much do you respect your family. And I will tell you now, though, that this one's more difficult to do as a study, as a DV. It's more difficult to find research on this one. So I would recommend going with option 1 or 3 for the DV. So again, in this study, you're focusing on how is culture related to responsibilities at home, how much you value helping out your family, and does that vary based on participant sex, right? So for example, if you're looking at Latinx participants, do you expect that female Latinas or Latinas would be doing more at home than Latinos, right? So that's what you'd be focusing on in this study, and then comparing them to another group. For example, Asian male and female participants. This last option is tricky to explain. So I will say, if you're interested in human factors, if you're interested in cognitive psychology, if you're interested in anything related to tech, I would go with this option. Well, you could do the gaming one too, but if you're interested in design of technology, how that relates to psychology, this is the option for you. So in this study, we're looking at how that expectation to have access to technology influences how much attention we pay while learning. So let me break this down. So in class, so even before we went online for COVID, in class, when I was debating offering my material online and I was lecturing in person, I considered, well, if I provide my videos later, will students pay attention right now while in lecture? They might come because, I was taking attendance. They might come and be in person because they have to for the points. But are they actually paying attention, or do they zone out because they know they have the material online later? Are they more likely to pay attention while there, or at least try to pay attention when they know this is the only time I have to get this material, right? So in this study, it's based off that idea. The way we set that up is create a situation where they either expect to have access to the technology later, or they don't have access to the technology, or they are told you're not going to have access to this technology later. So we show them a video and we tell them you'll be able to review the video and answer some questions later. You'll have access to the video while responding. Or you're going to have some questions afterwards, but you're not going to have access to this video afterwards. So we just want to share that with you. The thing is that after they watch the video, neither of those two groups get access to the video. So, right, so that way we're testing, well, the group that thought they were going to have access to the video, did they pay less attention because of that? Or did they learn less because of that? Now, the tricky part is when we were in person, we had this scenario. Well, we created a scenario that explained why they wouldn't have access to the video afterwards. You know what? Actually, the video isn't working on my iPad anymore. Can you just take the exam and do your best? Right? But then how do you do that online? Right? So in Zoom, we'd have to think about how we create that situation. Actually, I thought of it. Maybe you're sharing the video with the participants, right? And hey, I can't. It's not working on my end. I can't. Can you see the video? It's not working. I know this isn't ideal, but can you just do your best on the quiz? So actually, yeah. So you just saw me figure that out right now in this video. But that's what we'll do. So this would be a great option for those of you who are interested in that kind of stuff: cognitive psych, tech, design. I would say even education, right? Because for those in education, we're now thinking about, well, how is online access technology influencing what students are learning? So in this option, that's what we're looking at. I know that was kind of convoluted, but if you're at all interested in that option and you need clarification, reach out to me. Now, last thing I'm going to say is that I'm okay with you designing your own study as long as you follow the format I have here. 2 IVs, each IV has 2 groups within it, 2 levels, and 1 DV. The DV, ideally, you're not changing. I'm also okay with you changing any IV, any sex participant sex IV to gender identity. And I'm even okay with you changing that any IV to any IV you find interesting. So for example, for the gaming study, maybe you're not as interested in participant sex, so you do, are you a gamer or not? Those would be your groups. You would have to figure out some way to categorize people into gamers and non-gamers, or casual gamers, hardcore gamers. But the point is, you have to categorize participants into two groups, 2 categories for each IV, and those are the levels. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you need any clarification on any of these options, come to office hours, email me. I'm happy to help.